Well, vindication is the word. We've seen one of the heads of the 9/11 Commission, Senator Graham, come out and said that he's seen the 28 pages and that it shows that Saudi Arabia was quarterbacking much of the 9/11 attacks, where 15 of the 19 hijackers reportedly came from. And we've had 5 of the other members, so that's 6 of the 10, come out and say the same thing. I've had Congressman Walter Jones on recently, who's seen the 28 pages, and it doesn't just show that Saudi Arabia was involved, but there was a ordered stand down through the entire system. And now we have the New York Post, who would attack 9/11 truthers, with the headline yesterday, how the FBI is whitewashing the Saudi connection to 9/11, and then goes back to it. See, they always frame 9/11 truth as that you're saying, like Wile E. Coyote, they actually said this. This is a talking point they used, that the Bushes used, but then Chris Matthews of Hardball used, that I quote, Alex Jones, quote, believes, this is a quote, a talking point, it's been in newspapers, that like Wile E. Coyote, George W. Bush had a detonator plunger and blew up the World Trade Centers. No, I never said that. I said criminal elements working at the international level had drills that day, ordered a stand down, and then you extrapolate out to the Al-Qaeda being allowed into the country, the CIA threatening the visa section to let them in, saying they really work for us. Colonel Stephen Butler at the Defense Language School saying some of these guys trained at my base. You add all that together, we know we're being lied to. So we're simply saying the official story isn't true, and that's been proven. And because we don't know exactly what happened, then you can debate all day like a whodunit, like Clue. That's how you figure out in an investigation what really happened. And I'll ask Michael Springman, J. Michael Springman, his view. He has a new book out that I just started reading, and I even learned something from it, and I've studied this in depth. Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA handouts that rock the world, an insider's view. And the book is now available. He's a former U.S. diplomat, exposes the leadership and policies that spawned a deadly international conflict and killed over 1 million Iraqis. Springman holds degrees from American University, Georgetown University, and Catholic University of America. He currently practices law in Washington, D.C. Again, Springman serves the U.S. State Department government as diplomat, State Department's Foreign Service with postings in Germany, India, Saudi Arabia, and also worked at the U.S. Commerce Department. He left federal services and currently practices law in the Washington, D.C. area. MichaelSpringman.com. Michael Springman, 2 N's at the end.com. We'll tweet out his book and website right now, please, at Real Alex Jones. Please retweet that. Talk about courage. He blew it wide open in a few Canadian, British, and U.S. papers and German papers, but it was shut down everywhere else. We got him on the air going back 14 years ago. The 15th anniversary is coming up. And he was one of the key people to expose what happened. And tie that in today with Judicial Watch, who covered what he said back then. FBI holds special meeting in Juarez to address ISIS. DHS not invited. Here's another headline. General warns, the head of Southcom, of ISIS fighters entering the U.S. through Caribbean. He says they get into the Caribbean, then get in through Mexico. That's Newsweek. So understand, what happened on 9/11 is replaying again. And good FBI tried to expose the people training not to land the planes or take off in Minneapolis and in Phoenix and in Dallas and got made to stand down. So this is going on. The government's not our enemy. Criminal elements within it that are exploiting this to launch wars and take our liberties are, in my view. Now, I'm done with that preface. Mr. Springman, great to have you back after many years. I think you were on about 6 years ago and then 14 years ago. But God bless you for your incredible courage and for continuing to stand up and writing this book. I know you're a successful lawyer in your own right. Don't need to, write a book, but I'm glad you've written this testament as a witness to what you saw. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you for having me on the program. I'm delighted to be able to speak to your audience and to do my best to answer any questions you might have.
Well, let's do this. Let's let you quarterback it at first. Take us back to 9/11, walk us through the book, and then give us your take on what you think is currently happening. Because, boy, isn't it pertinent today how our government funded the Free Syrian Army that was really Al-Qaeda. Now they're ISIS. And now we were told Al-Qaeda and Muslim extremists were defeated. Now it's a bigger threat than ever 3 wars later.
Yeah, it's basically changing their brand names. When I was in Jeddah, and that's more than 20 years ago now, I was being pressured to issue visas to people that had no ties to either Saudi Arabia or to their own country. They couldn't explain why they were going to America. And I was being ordered by Jay Freres, the consul general, who some suspect of working for the Central Intelligence Agency, and other people with the consulate to issue these visas. Never gave me an explanation why. If they had, conceivably, I would have been dumb enough to issue the visas that they wanted on the basis of, well, I work for the federal government, you work for the federal government, this is a federal government interest, I'll do it. But no, they couldn't do that. So after I was out of the Foreign Service and back in D.C., we had September 11th. And Joe Trencher, the journalist who tipped me off to what they were really doing, recruiting the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, to go to the federal government, to go to the Department of Justice and the FBI and say, this is what was really going on. This is where you guys ought to look. And I was passed from office to office to office. And finally, the Washington field office for the FBI said, oh, we'll call you back. Well, that was 14 years ago. Since then, I've been speaking out on this. I've been writing about this. And aside from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, RAI, RT, and a German journalist, I've been ignored by the American press, the mainstream media, the fawning corporate media, as Ray McGovern calls it.
Well, they certainly are fawning. And if you just joined us, visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA handouts that rock the world, J. Michael Springman. Let's go back and look at this, because do you feel vindicated now, before we walk through it, that you do have the head of the 9/11 Commission coming out and saying they basically covered up and stood down for Saudi Arabia? I mean, that's complicity right there. And it's now even in the New York Post that demonized anyone, including firefighters and police, that questioned 9/11.
Well, it makes me feel a bit better, but then you've got to look at the fact that they've kept a lid on this for 20 years or more now. They've ruined people's lives. They've mocked them in print and so forth. So it's better, but the wheels still haven't come off the wagon, and nobody's in jail and nobody's been executed.
Well, I want to give you the floor right now, as best you can tell. Break down exactly what happened with the hijackers, what your colleagues tried to do, what you reported on and exposed, and then all these years later, what do you think really happened on 9/11?
Okay. Well, going back to me in Jeddah, I had gotten this strange conversation with the then American ambassador, Walter Cutler, who was in town for consultations with State Department officials. And one of the people from the Saudi desk, the people who follow what's going on in a given country, called me and said, Cutler's in town. Do you want to say hello to him? And I said, yeah, sure. I figured it'd be a 5-minute hello and goodbye session. And he spends 45 minutes talking to me about all the problems that my predecessor, Greta Holtz, had created for the embassy in Riyadh. She was refusing visas, so he said, to the servants of rich Saudi women. They're seamstresses, hairdressers, and all these other factotums, and they just couldn't travel without them. And I thought, he's telling me something, but I have absolutely no idea what he's telling me. So when this was over, I talked to the desk officer, and I said, what was that all about? He said, I have no idea. Cutler's just a queer duck. Well, I get off to Jeddah, get all this. I'm welcome with open arms. People tell me, you're such an improvement over Greta Holtz. She was such a bitch. She was a troublemaker. Nobody could get along with her, and so forth. Well, after a bit, I started getting pressure on issuing visas to people who weren't qualified. One guy, or actually two Pakistanis, I think, were going to a trade show. And they couldn't name the trade show in the United States and couldn't tell me what city it was located in. But Paul Arvid Tveit, Tveit, a case officer, according to namebase.org, who was working undercover at the commercial section, called me and demanded visas for these guys. And I said, no, they haven't proved that they have any compelling reason to come back either to Saudi Arabia or their own country. So then he calls Justice, given name Stevens, the head of the consular section, and got these guys their visas. And this pretty much went on for the 18 months or so that I was in Jeddah. Nobody could explain this. And the odd thing was, Eric Qualkenbush, the Qualkenbush, the head of the CIA base at the consulate, he came to me and said, Mike, we've got this Iranian agent. We want him in Washington for consultations. We really need to have him there. Can you issue him a visa? Wink, wink. Well, the guy had a clean passport. He had previous visas to go to the United States in it. He was working at, or running, in fact, the family had a Oriental rug shop in the town. And he was going to visit clients. He had their names there on a sheet of paper on company letterhead. He talked about what he was going to do there. He answered all my questions. And I issued him a visa. And I said, good God, send me more people like him. And I still to this day don't know why Qualkenbush tipped me the wink about this guy, but said not a word about all these other people who were really sleazy characters that the agency was sending to the U.S. for training to send on to Afghanistan to the war against the Soviets.
So that's why you say this went on 20 years, because this was happening even before 9/11. Now, fast forward from my memory, you end up leaving, but then you've talked to colleagues and find out they were told the same thing with Mohammed Atta and others. Walk us through that.
Okay, well, once I was out, I heard from Joe Trento, the journalist who follows national security issues, that the real reason they wanted visas for these guys was to send them to Afghanistan. They were creating the Mujahideen. And I said, that's why they got so mad when I refused the visas. And I started researching. I started writing letters. I sent letters to everybody involved, including Joseph P. O'Neill, the so-called inspector who came out and really wanted me to tell him what was going on in Jeddah. And he said, I'll protect you. And he didn't. He passed the word to the State Department and the CIA, of whom I think he was a member, to get rid of me. And I had nothing but trouble after that. Once I was out of state, and after I talked to Trento, I had written an article about this, published in Covert Action Quarterly. The hand that rules the visa machine rocks the world. This got me a few interviews. And I tried after that to learn exactly why I had been thrown out of state. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request and a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit around, maybe 1991, 1992, thereabouts, and got nowhere. As time went by, I sent letters to everybody else I had been involved with, Freres and Henry Encher and Karen Sasahara, his successor as political officer, saying what was really going on in Jeddah. Time has gone by, you can tell me. Dead silence. So then I filed a Freedom of Information Act request and ultimately another lawsuit, I guess about 3 years ago now, asking what I should have asked for the first time around. All of the visas that had been overruled by Freres and Justice Stevens. And when I was in Jeddah, the filing cabinets were bulging with old visa applications that nobody had shredded. They were 5, 10, 15 years old. And my staff said to me, look, Mike, if we shred these things like we're supposed to do every year, we're never going to deal with the 100 to 200 visa applicants a day we're getting. And we got a choice. You want us to shred documents or you want us to work on these visa applications? So I said, do the visas. And the lawsuit again was dismissed by Reggie Walton, a Bush appointee, a guy who was put onto the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, the secret court. And he first demanded the names of all 45,000 visa applicants a year I was dealing with. And I said, that's impossible. And the state said, well, we shred these documents every year. And I said, that's impossible, and gave them an affidavit about the bulging, overflowing file cabinets. And he simply dismissed the case. And I said, well, I want to know who who shredded these documents, what was their names, what was their rank, when it was done. Don't you people keep records? There's a guy in the British government, Nick Pope, who had written about freedom of information and national security. And he had mentioned that, well, in a big organization, papers go missing, files get misplaced, and so forth. But if you're dealing with government, if you're dealing with national security issues, if you're dealing with major topics like visa applications, these don't go missing. And if they do, there's a very questionable reason for why, and we need to investigate something like that.